Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our newest Make Music webinar, Engaging Rehearsal Strategies for Students Who Cannot Practice Outside of the Classroom. My name is Felicia Elanum, and I'll be running everything in the background for you today. We're thrilled to host today's webinar, and I hope that it inspires you as you're finishing out your school year. And so I'm very excited to introduce to you our wonderful presenter for today, Megan Lewin. Megan is the director of bands at Westminster High School, where she conducts wind ensemble, symphonic band, concert band, jazz laboratory, marching band, and pit orchestra. Mrs. Lewin received her Bachelor of Music Education instrumental emphasis from the Hart School in Hartford, Connecticut, summa cum laude, and her Master of Music Education with a cognate in conducting from the University of Colorado, Boulder. A passionate educator, Mrs. Lewin acts as the band coordinator for the Adams County Honor Festival, presents at national and international conferences, and hosts practicum music education students from CU Boulder. She is also the Colorado State Chair for Women Band Directors International, where she works to support women in the field of band. Megan, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me. And thank you everyone for being here today for this webinar. Before we begin, I want to explain where this webinar came from. I have always taught in programs where my students' lives outside of the classroom are absolutely paramount in my journey to getting them to engage in the classroom. SmartMusic has also been a huge part of my journey to get those students to engage, as well as pandemic recovery, which we are all in right now, right? And just trying to find old ways and dusting off the cobwebs of getting students to engage and new ways of getting our students to engage as they're, navigating this raw time. And then I've always built my program around building a family through music, and that has always guided what I do in my classroom and how I engage my students. So that's where the ideas in this session come from. Here's our agenda for today. We're going to talk about effective rehearsal strategies based on building relationships, incorporating SmartMusic through large group and small group instruction, and then a concept that I use in my classroom called personal practice time. Maya Angelou had it right, and will have it right forever. I've learned that people will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. And that is true for our students every day in our classrooms. So what can we do to make them feel seen and heard? So the first thing I do to get my students engaged in my classroom is find out who they are as people, not just musicians. I want to know what they're interested in my classroom and outside. I need to know what their home life is like. Maybe they're not focused because they're going home to a place that doesn't have food or a stable adult, and no wonder they can't focus. I want to know why they're in my music program to begin with. Maybe they do want to be the next great trombone player, but maybe they just need a place to belong and they need a place to feel safe. And why can't they practice at home? This is something I was frustrated by when I started my career. Why can't you just go home and practice? Well, sometimes they can't. Sometimes they don't have a home life that will support that, and it's not a safe place to bring an instrument, or they live in an apartment, or they're taking care of their siblings. They have a job. It never ends. So if we can know the answers to as many of these questions as possible, then we can start to engage them in our classroom in an authentic way. When we're building these relationships, we're meeting our students where they are, not where they should be. They're in 8th grade, they should be playing a grade 2. No, they should be playing whatever music that they need to be playing to increase their musicianship and their growth as a person. And by building relationships, we can incorporate their interests and experiences into the room that will enrich all of the lives in the classroom, including our own as the educator. And building relationships gives our students voice and choice in our programs. I have my students pick a lot of the repertoire that we play. For our first 3 concerts, I offer them a handful of options that would all work for them. But at the end of the day, they listen and they choose what they're going to perform so that they're much more invested and they don't feel like I'm just commanding what they do. My students help us with warm-ups. They help lead warm-ups. They give me ideas for warm-ups. They tell me which chorale they want to play that day so that they feel like they're in charge of how they're getting ready for rehearsal. We have an equipment crew. I actually don't touch chairs and stands at concerts anymore, which is fantastic. And the students love feeling like they're running their own program by taking care of all the equipment we have, which in band is a lot and too much for one person anyway. And we develop leadership roles everywhere we can. We have band president, vice president, librarian. In marching band, we have sectional coaches and visual captains. Wherever you can give them that leadership role, do it. We know how to do our job. Let them learn how to do parts of our job. It'll make our lives easier and it'll make them more invested in your program. Another way to build relationships with your students is to provide a little bit of mindfulness. A little bit of mindfulness goes a very long way right now more than ever. And mindfulness can include breathing exercises, exercise, stretching, positive social interactions with their peers. I have a mindfulness program every day in my classroom. We do a mindful minute where we work on completing the stress response cycle. This work is based off of the work on burnout by Emily and Amelia Nagoski, the most brilliant women I have found in the last few years. And by focusing on completing that stress response cycle, you show your students that their stress is valid. They are told so often as young adults that it's just drama, it's just teenage drama, but it's not. Their stress is valid and their struggles are very real. My students have lived more life than they should have at this age. And I need to show them that I see that. They need to feel seen and heard for who they are, what they stand for, what they want out of life. And if we can do that for them, even just a little bit every day, they will engage in our classes. So beyond the building relationships, I have found a lot of success by incorporating SmartMusic into my program, and mostly through large group instruction. It's traditionally been used one-on-one, but I have found that in the large group setting, it can help our students work on decoding skills. It can gamify our curriculum. It can work on composition skills, and it can record their progress. Here are some of the ways that SmartMusic can help you work on decoding. For my students that really can't practice outside of the classroom, they're not reading music as much as other students might be. And my students aren't really reading in general. A lot of them are language learners and now learning a new visual language of music too. So SmartMusic can help you do rhythm reading every day in an efficient way. The composition tool can help you pull examples from the music you are working on so that your students can work on decoding notes and rhythms. Students can create examples for one another, so they're working on not just decoding, but composition. There is a fantastic tool called Sight Reading Builder, and you're about to see videos of each of these so you can see where these exist in SmartMusic. And through all of these activities, you can move from the whole group to smaller groups to individuals, and you can incorporate student leaders. The first example I have for you is how to use the pre-made rhythm reading examples in SmartMusic to work on decoding.
SmartMusic includes a bunch of pre-made rhythm reading examples that makes practicing rhythm reading easy for you and your students. From the home page, go in the top right-hand corner to Find Music, and then scroll down until you find the Exercises tab. And from here, scroll down again until you find the Rhythm Reading Exercises tab. This is wonderful because there are tons of pre-made rhythm reading patterns that go from very simple to quite advanced, and they're already made for you, so you don't have to create your own resources. The way I used it with my students is I open the example that we're working on that day, and I choose a different instrument each day because we're working on rhythm and not pitch, but that's totally up to you. And from here, we're all focused at the front of the room on the same screen, practicing our whole note rhythm reading. And as the students get more advanced and you need to incorporate different rhythms, you explore the patterns that SmartMusic offers for you And maybe today you're working in 2/4 on half notes and quarter notes. But it makes it really simple and engaging for you and your students to work on rhythm reading every day.
Using SmartMusic on a big screen at the front of the room is also an excellent way to get everyone focused into the same place. Our students love screens, so putting a big screen up in front of them is a great way to get their focus. This next example is how you can use the compose tool for decoding in SmartMusic.
Another way you can use SmartMusic to practice decoding notes and rhythms with your students in an engaging way is the compose tool, which is under the little quill picture. The way we use this in my classroom is I will use the compose tool to grab a passage from the music we are working on in class. And if I've already put that into Finale, I'll just import my music XML file. But the great thing is, when you go to Quick Creation, it is a Finale file. So you can build all of your passages here within SmartMusic and save it. From here, once I've inserted whatever I need, which is obviously more than just a half note on C, I will project this onto the screen to have the students practicing decoding the notes and the rhythms as a large group. Another way you can use this compose tool to practice the decoding is to have the students create their own examples and share them with each other in small groups or in pairs. And that way they're not only practicing decoding, but they're also practicing composing. And it's giving them some voice and choice in their learning and making them feel responsible for their education, which is what we want at the end of the day.
And with this compose tool, I didn't add this in the video, but sometimes I will also screen grab what I've made in SmartMusic so that my students can I have one of those interactive like TV projectors and they can write the counting on the board as well. If your students are like mine, they typically need to see the writing of the counting at least once before they practice it. Another great leadership opportunity for your students to help each other out. And this final video for this section is on how to use the Sight Reading Builder.
The Sight Reading Builder tool in SmartMusic is an awesome way to practice decoding notes and rhythms with your students in an engaging way at the front of the room that's a little bit gamified. So from the home screen, go into the top right-hand corner. You'll find SR Builder at the bottom. That's your Sight Reading Builder. And from here, you get to set up what you need for solo instruments, for specific ensembles. You can make a custom ensemble, which is what I normally do. In order for this to project big enough for my students, I have the flutes and the percussionists on mallets read the flute line, clarinets and trumpets read the clarinet line, alto saxes get their own line, tenors get their own line so that they're reading higher than the clarinet and trumpets are reading. The horns get their own line, the trombones and euphoniums read off of the same line, and then the tubas read off of their line. My students love the Sight Reading Builder, and I do too, because once you set your levels and you set your time signature, your key signatures, your rhythms, your ranges, your notes, you just click and it auto generates example after example for your students to read. They are in unison, so it's strength in numbers for your students. And then you do what you need to from there. You have your students mentally prepare and then go, or you just have them rapid fire read as many examples as they can that day. It's an opportunity to talk about courtesy accidentals like in this exercise. You can talk about the tempo, the time signature, the key, whatever you need to do. My students love, especially when they sight read it, and then I play the example for them through SmartMusic, and they have to compare and contrast their performance to the correct performance. And then they have an opportunity to talk about how they're going to change what they did so that it becomes accurate. And they love to see how many examples they can get done, within 5 minutes or less, 3 minutes or less, whatever works for you and your students. But it's a great way to rapid fire sight read practice every day.
And in that video, I only showed you level 1, but those examples do get quite advanced. So if you have students who are just eating sheet music for breakfast and they're ready to move on, you can meet them where they are, I promise. Another way I've incorporated smart music, and this is kind of an overall generalization of how I've done it, but is gamification, especially when I taught middle school. Holy cow, my students like, begged every day, can we play smart music? Because we would see who could count the rhythm the fastest, who could count the rhythm the most accurately the first time, who could clap the rhythm the fastest, who could play the rhythm on one note or bow the rhythm on one note. And we had prizes. I mean, whatever works, right? If your school allows you to have candy as prizes, it's pretty helpful. I'd give out little prizes along the way, and then at the end of the week, we'd have like the big culminating who can count this really hard rhythm the fastest with the metronome, and they get the biggest prize. Woo! It doesn't have to be candy. It can be experiences in your room. We also had student leader prizes. Like if you are the winner that day, you get to be my secretary and answer my phone, or you get to conduct the next piece we're going to practice, or you get to be equipment crew head that day and help put away the chairs. Whatever it takes to get them incentivized, whatever prize works. Another way you can get it to be more advanced is using that compose tool again, who can create the most complicated rhythm and perform it accurately. Whatever you can do to gamify and using this technology just to make them want to do better for that prize extrinsically, but eventually that prize becomes intrinsic. And my students who struggle with rhythm reading eventually are reading fluently because they wanted the lollipop, but then they realize that it makes their life easier in class and they're more engaged. We talked about the composition tool a little bit earlier, but let's dive a little bit deeper into how to use the composition tool. I loved using this as a class, as a whole class, when I taught middle school orchestra especially. And if you have a smartboard, it's a major bonus because it becomes a kinesthetic process. Because when you have the smartboard, the students can drag and drop the notes and rhythms as they compose, and they're feeling the music as they're seeing and hearing it. It's a great way to use student leaders. They're the ones up at the board helping make the composition and asking their peers for advice. And then from the whole class setting, you can move down to smaller groups and individuals. But no matter what setting you're in, you're always checking for understanding with the composition tool because they can't use the notes and rhythms unless they understand how they work. So here is a video on how I have used the compose tool in large group, small group, and individual settings.
The composition tool in SmartMusic is a fantastic way to teach your students about composition in large, medium, and small group settings. The way I use this is I go to the compose tool and then I project the quick creation on the screen so that it's a blank template. This was ideal when I had a smartboard. If you have a smartboard, it's just the best. What you can do is have a student leader come to the board, and then they are going to physically drag and drop whatever note and rhythm they decide into the staff. And then they see, they hear, and they feel the note that they have created on the screen. And gosh, for students that are learning to decode, it is powerful. If you don't have a smartboard, I don't have one anymore, you can have the students go to the computer that you're working on and they can do the clicking of the notes and the rhythms if you're comfortable with that. Or they can just tell you what note and rhythm they would like and you put it into the screen. I always have rules for my students when we go through this process so that they're not overwhelmed. So for example, today's rules might be you can only use whole notes and half notes, and you can only use G, A, and B, because maybe I'm working with beginning alto saxophone players. And so we go through and they use their whole notes and their half notes, they use G, A, B, and you decide how long the composition is going to be. You decide how much each student leader is allowed to put into the screen, Maybe it's one measure, maybe it's two, maybe it's four. And once you've created your composition, you can go back and listen to it as a group. And then what we do is the students get 20 seconds on the clock to discuss what did they like about the composition and what would they like to change. And they turn to a neighbor and they talk about it. And then as a class, we go back through the composition for another minute or two. We make any changes that we want to change, listen to it again. Once we're satisfied, we will play through it on our instruments so that we can feel what our music feels like and we can hear it and experience it as a group. Beyond the large group setting, you can have small groups of students do this, all sharing a device, either a laptop, an iPad, whatever you have. And then eventually you can get all of your students individually composing. But they started together in a group where it was a little more safe, safety in numbers, learning together. They went down to the smaller group and then finally by themselves. And if you're using SmartMusic, they can just save their composition and submit it right to you. And it's easier for you to grade because they're all in one place. But no matter how you use it, the composition tool is a fantastic way to get your students engaged with the creative composition process in music.
The compose tool and composition in general, also your students will just be proud of what they've created and that they're playing their own music written by them, not people who are older and just different than them. It's theirs, and that creates a sense of family. Another way to incorporate smart music in your classroom is to record your students' progress. You can record them in the large group settings, in small group settings, or on their own. But no matter where you're recording them, it's always helping them evaluate their performances. And that's a learning target of mine. I'm sure it's wrapped into all of your curriculums. That's what we want them to be doing as musicians and people. We want them listening and giving feedback to others in a constructive way and improving. So here's a video on how to use the record tool in different settings for evaluating performances.
The record tool in SmartMusic helps you and your students practice evaluating performances in your classroom. You can do this in large group settings, small group settings, and individually. The way I've done this in large group settings is I'll pull up the piece that we're working on, and I'll pull up a random part. For example, I might pull up the horn part for Lament and Tribal Dances by Michael Sweeney, because everyone needs to know what the horns have at the beginning. It's very important. And in the large group setting, I will turn off the accompaniment, I will turn off the horn part, and I usually keep the metronome on, and I usually keep it on full blast, so that way they're staying consistent with the recording. And then I just use SmartMusic to record whatever section we want in that moment, so the students can quickly listen back, evaluate, and move forward. After I hit that red record button, the button to the right will turn purple, and that's what I will hit to listen back to the recording. Keep in mind, in the large group setting, it's designed for individuals, so the notes are going to turn red and show up all over the place because they're not going to be correct according to the horn 1 part. So you just have to ignore the visual when you're using the large group setting, but it makes it really easy to just record quickly. In a small group setting, actually still within a large group, I've also done this for sections who are struggling while still engaging the rest of the band. So again, maybe the horns in the Lament and Tribal Dances are struggling with their opening line. So I will turn off their part, I will keep the metronome on, and I'll keep the accompaniment on. And say we're going to practice the beginning to 14, where they have this opening horn call. The rest of the ensemble is going to move their fingers and slides and mallets. They're going to move along to the music, but really, really quietly, or maybe with no sound at all. So they're still getting the sound to feel connection in that practice, and the horns are going to play out loud. Now I'm going to hit record, or we're going to record how the horns are doing with the accompaniment behind them. And then we'll listen back as a group, and the horns and the whole band can help give them some feedback on what's going well and what they could do to improve their part and feel more confident. Again, The notes might not all turn green like they're supposed to because you have more than one person, and it might catch some of the accompaniment through your speakers. So again, the visual might not be as helpful for that setting. Individually, though, when students have their own devices and their own SmartMusic accounts, then they can rely more on the visual. When the individual students play, it's your choice if you want them to use the accompaniment in their part or the metronome. That's up to you. You can also change the tempo for individuals if they're not quite ready to play at the written tempo. But when the individual plays, the notes will turn green if they're right and they'll turn red if they're wrong, which is a really great visual and another layer of feedback for your students that they get before they hear your feedback when you listen to their individual performance. But no matter how you're using the record tool in a large setting, a small group setting, or individually, you're helping your students practice evaluating performances, which is what we want them to be doing all the time.
Another way to incorporate smart music. Oh, sorry, Felicia, go ahead.
Yeah, just before you move on, I wanted to point out, Giovanna put in the chat that recording in a group setting is a great idea. If you want, you can turn off the immediate feedback under display, and that way there's no red and green notes to distract your visual.
Thank you, Giovanna. I totally forgot about that feature. That's right. You can turn that off so the visual is not turning red and green. That's a great point. So another way I've used smart music in a small group setting is as a sectional tool. My students learn best by ear. We're working on their eye every day, but their ears are powerful, and I want to honor that and use that strength. And so we use smart music as an audio, like an extra teacher, but they can listen to their part whenever they need to and make sure that they're matching. They can also see the tracking line, the blue line tracking over the notes as they are listening and watching. So it is increasing their reading as they go, because maybe they're not actually counting it in their head, but it's helping them understand how the notes and rhythms interact. And you can also record their progress in the small group setting. So here is a video on how I use this as a sectional tool.
One of the best ways I have used SmartMusic in my program is during sectional time. My students learn best by ear, and even though we are working on their eyes every day, practicing decoding notes and rhythms, I want to honor who they are as students and musicians, and we're going to use their strength. So in sectionals, each group will take a device with them that has SmartMusic, so that way they can listen to their part as SmartMusic visually tracks over it for them. So while they're using their strong ears, it is also developing their eyes, helping them track over the rhythm. Even if they can't count 1, 2, 3, and 4 yet, at least they understand that a quarter note is longer than an eighth note. And also in sectionals, if they have a question about a fingering and I'm not there, they can click on the note and find the different fingerings. They can click on the note and listen to it. So it can answer a lot of questions that I normally would if I were in the room, but when I'm not there. And then at the end of sectional time, to keep them accountable, I will have the students turn off their part and record themselves as a group. So that way I know that they're using their time effectively when I'm not in the room. We can also record individuals as needed so they can hear one another. But this SmartMusic has been an invaluable tool in sectionals as a support teacher while I am running around trying to be everywhere at once.
I also understand that sectionals are not a reality for everybody. Sectionals are not something I did very often when I taught middle school, but they are something that I've trained my high schoolers to do quite well on their own. So if it's an available tool for you, go for it. SmartMusic will absolutely help you because we can't be everywhere at once, and our students are going to have questions that they don't know how to answer or they don't know how to find the answer, and SmartMusic can find it for them quickly. This next section is something that I've developed in my classroom. I'd be very curious to hear if other people do something similar, but I've called it personal practice time. Like I've said, my students cannot practice at home. Maybe a handful can sometimes, but there's no way that they're going home consistently and practicing 30 minutes, 60 minutes every day, or even a few times a week. So I need to teach my students how to practice as a large group. They have to know how to function in the ensemble setting, but still get work done that they need to get done as an individual. And so what we do is we have small periods of personal practice time, and the students know that's what we call it. It provides frequent check-ins for me, both formally and informally, so I can see how more individuals are doing and not just rely on what I'm hearing from the podium. It helps me walk around and help my students and watch them from a different angle. And it's a really great way to deal with behavior without losing time. So here is the format of how I go about this. From the podium, I will say, you have 1 minute on the clock to practice measures 1 through 8. And I really do time it. In the beginning of the year, there's a timer on the screen or a little timer on my stand. At this point, I'm usually looking at my watch or the clock on the wall, but it is exactly 1 minute. And as the timer's going, I am walking around and I'm answering questions. I might be fixing instruments because goodness knows that happens all the time, or handing out new reeds, or fixing so many strings when I taught orchestra, and addressing behavior. This has been so much more effective for me, and my students have been less reactive. If there's a behavior issue, I'll say, okay, personal practice time, go. And I get to go talk to that student and figure out what's going on without blowing it up into a whole class thing. And then I call time when that timer is up, and I get back up on the podium, and immediately, baton up, we play through that spot. We spot check for accountability. The students have to know that they're accountable for playing those measures after that minute. And it might not be perfect, but it's expected that they will get better in at least one way by the time personal practice time is up. The benefits have been immense. My students learn how to practice. They don't get to practicing anywhere else, so it teaches them how to break down music and get better at it. It teaches them to use their time effectively in the classroom, and that is huge. If I am pulled away by a phone call or someone at the door, my students immediately are in their music and they're practicing and they're asking questions and they're checking in with each other because they know, hey, oh, it's personal practice time. If Mrs. Lewin's not right in front of me, I know what to do. It increases their accountability and their leadership because they know at the end of that personal practice time, they have to produce something, and they help each other out. They answer each other's questions. They learn to ask for help, and they look out for one another. And it helps the students feel seen and heard about the practice time outside of class because they are aware that that's something they want. They want to be able to practice at home, but they can't. And personal practice time is me saying, hey, I'm not going to make you feel guilty about it. I am not going to be upset. I'm not going to wish for something that can't exist. I'm going to use what we do have. And I'm going to make our time together so effective that we're going to get better anyway. I mean, some of my advanced students sound like they practice, and they don't, but they use every second in class to get better. So to summarize what I've talked about today, we need to invest in our students as people. They're like this little plant. We have to provide them nourishment. We can't just give them water or just give them food or just sunlight. We have to give them the whole package. We have to see them as people first, students and musicians secondarily. We need to meet them where they are. If we acknowledge how they're doing and provide the scaffolds and resources they need, they know that we see them. We're not upset by what they should be doing. We're celebrating what they are doing. We need to incorporate their ears and their eyes. They are both valuable strengths, and we need to work on incorporating and elevating both. SmartMusic is an excellent tool for all of this. It helps supplement our teaching and helps capture data and helps our students engage at the front of the room and helps gamify our curriculum so the students are having fun as they're learning. And personal practice time is a great concept that I've been using that helps our students be really efficient and effective with their class time because none of us ever have enough. And if you're like us and our students can't practice outside of the classroom, personal practice time is where the work happens. It's where they're going to make those personal changes that just sets the spark and the whole ensemble just starts to come together because they get that time to invest in themselves with your guidance. If you ever want to share ideas or ask questions, please email me. I love geeking out about engaging rehearsal strategies and mindfulness and all of the things. Thank you so much for being here at this presentation.